We write this report as sociologists, not ethicists. We do not make claims as to the morality of abortion, nor do we mean to imply that its morality can be determined through popularism or the sum total of Americans' attitudes towards it. But public deliberation toward moral discernment is predicated on knowledge, listening, empathy, and awareness of oneself and others. So, too, is deliberation toward better policy, laws, and mechanisms for social support. This has been our aim to facilitate a more productive conversation that may foster mutual understanding and collective goods. And since this is a podcast dedicated to Christian conversation, this survey is a good place to start. This is the Life Given Podcast. I'm Isaac Lopez. Welcome to the show. I'm glad you guys are joining me on today, this Monday morning. Although I have to be completely honest with you, this show is pre-recorded a couple days in advance, as Ruth and I will have been on a camping trip, and we'll be returning on Monday. But I do want to release this on time and on schedule. So if you haven't seen as many promotional things, it's because I will have been out of town. But this is still up live, and I'm glad you guys could join us. So even though I'm on a camping trip, you guys are still getting the Life Given podcast. I'm dedicated to the show. Also, I really enjoy doing it. And kind of just to get the self-plugging done and out of the way, if you know people that really would benefit from a short form podcast, and that want to get more in touch with current events, send them this way. Send them this way and have them join the Life Given Podcast Facebook group, or find us on our various social medias, Life Given News on Facebook, TLG Podcast on Parler, or _ TLG Podcast _. I've been able to talk to multiple friends who listen to the show, and I'm so grateful for your guys' support. And really, that you guys are the reason I'm doing this, to just be able to take a hobby or something of an interest that I have and share it with you guys. For those of you who may A, not have the same interests that I have, or B, that just don't have the time. So when you share the show, it really goes a long way in helping me out, and also just helping the show out. And if this is a tool that you find that you can use in your own lives, go ahead and share it with other people. And also subscribe on whatever platform. So anyway, normally I put that at the end of the show, but the majority of listeners listen for sure for the first half of the show. So I'm going to go ahead and put the plug here, as well as, and I won't have to do it at the end. So there you go. Obviously, if you don't like the show, then don't share it. But also don't dislike it. Don't be a buzzkill. Anyway, let's get back to the show. Let's actually discuss what we're here to discuss and talk about, instead of me rambling on and on about how much I need you guys, because that's always fun to listen to. Anyway, there was a recent survey that came out just on last Monday, so a week ago now, or a week to the release of this podcast, a week prior to the dropping of this episode. There was a survey released in tandem on how Americans understand abortion, a comprehensive interview study of abortion attitudes in the U.S., conducted and led by Tricia C. Bruce, PhD. They did this in conjunction, I believe, with Notre Dame, and she also had a team of 4 other sociologists, I believe. I'm trying to recall from my report I did actually on this survey over at the Life Given News. I'll link to that in the show notes if you want a shorthand, because this survey is 60 pages long. They did 217 interviews with people from 6 different states, and so that allowed them to try to get multiple different views and different cultures enveloped in this study. And so 217 people with a minute, an average of 75-minute long conversations in person or over the phone. This isn't like just some form they sent out online and asked them to send it to answer it and send it back in. These were actual conversations, and the goal for this, the researchers acknowledged that. There's a convenience of conducting a conventional survey of people, but they wanted to they acknowledged it's that kind of study's limitations and said, quote, surveys by design do not probe the reasons or potential complexities behind views on abortion. Neither can they dig deeper to interrogate meaningful connections, experiences, or life course changes informing someone's response. Now, so they wanted to get a better understanding of what's a pro-lifer think, what's a pro-choice, someone who is pro-choice, how do they think and how did they reason to where they got, and then where are the people in the middle? Because it's came out that from the study there's a lot of people in the middle, not just pro-life and pro-choice. They had 7 findings from their survey, so they conducted it back I think August through like May through August of 2019, and they just released their findings here in July of 2020. And they said that they had 7 major findings. 1, Americans don't talk much about abortion. It's kind of a difficult issue. 2, survey statistics oversimplify Americans' attitudes about abortion, which this survey really highlighted that. Number 3, position labels are imprecise substitutes for actual views toward abortion. Definitely, they definitely got to that in this survey. 4, abortion talk concerns as much what happens before and after as it does the abortion itself. Number 5, Americans ponder a good life as much as they do life. Number 6, abortion is not merely political to everyday Americans, but intimately personal. And number 7, and this is the one that really is a kicker and confusing, it seems, with the state of our country, Americans don't want abortion. So a very interesting survey and analysis, and I have to tell you that I've worked my way through this. I didn't necessarily read all of it, but I've gone through it, and I pulled out some of the highlights and some of the things that I think are important because um, as I read in the introduction, that's a direct quote from uh, the uh, one of the reasons why they conducted this survey, why they conducted this survey as they did, and they just saw shortcomings in the way that surveys were conducted, but also in just conversations. Like it's one of the most prevalent issues in the United States, and if you ask me, it's the most important issue on the table right now. Um, and it can be a very sticky conversation. So what they did was go in and try to pull out the nuances and show like there are different ways that people think, there are different ways that people feel, there are certain things that people will say but then they may not actually believe it or understand it. So I wanted to just pull out a few of the statements that, or a few of the um, things that they found and discuss it, because I think it really sheds quite a bit of light on the state of America today, and more specifically on the state of Americans' attitudes toward abortion and what Americans actually think. There is an ambivalence that has driven us over the cliff. Okay, there's a lot of ambivalence when it comes to abortion, and I think that that is the cause for where we have become, where we have come in the abortion conversation. So just as we jump in here at the very out, I think this is in their preamble to the 60-page summary of their findings. Now, So four of their goals is to introduce a spectrum of attitudes toward abortion's morality and legality. Their second one, to identify common wells of meaning that people draw upon to articulate and situate those attitudes. So what impacts each and every person. Number three, to deconstruct familiar labels and their limitations. I think that can be a good thing. Number four, to present the premises of and recommendations for a more empathetic, productive conversation about abortion among publics of all persuasions. So this is interesting. Number four is honestly the one that I think is fascinating because it almost sounds like they want to reinvent the wheel of conversations or reinvent how we have been having discussions about abortion. And I think that can be very admirable, but I think that can be very difficult in what they're trying to do with it. So that's my question. Did they succeed in reinventing the wheel, or at least in changing the conversation, making it more empathetic, productive, um, of people of all persuasions? So let's jump into really one of the core things that this survey values, and that is showing the nuance to every side of the abortion debate. Here's one of their statements. Labels are likewise difficult to affix to the complex abortion attitudes of these four Americans. Madeline identifies as pro choice, Celeste and Ian as pro life. Lydia at first says pro choice before changing to I'm both, and then later, neither, and pro mother's choice. About such labels, Lydia says, I don't think they'll fit anybody. Ian also resists labeling when he says, I don't like being pushed in those buckets. I think my position or my thought about abortion is sound, but I don't like being pushed in those spots because it doesn't define enough of why I view it the way I do. We introduced these interviewees, four of 217 people we interviewed, 217 of about 330 million Americans, to caution against neat summaries of attitudes toward abortion, as convenient as some categories may be. Presenting data on moral and legal views apart from context is insufficient to understand how and why Americans feel the way they do about the issue of abortion. So this comes after like a slew of testimonies. You know, there are quite a few testimonials throughout this that they pull on, and they make general observations when they look across the percentage of people that said this about their stance, right? And I think that this is that this can be true, right? That categories can really forget the nuance, can really forget the individual when we start talking about the collective. We kind of discussed that with Black Lives Matter. Sometimes when you lump in someone to a category, you forget that they're their own individual. And I think that this interview heavy survey makes that quite abundantly clear. And I think that it's a good reminder when discussing with someone who may be across the political aisle, the the difficulties, the experiences that they might have come through, and not just beat them over the head with your statistics and facts. And that's a very great reminder. And honestly, I think it's brilliant what this survey was trying to do in a certain sense. There are two things really we're focusing on today, and that's the conversational aspect of this survey, and then moral ambivalence and what that is and what it means for America. So on the conversational side, I think it's succeeding. That it definitely succeeded in showing that when you're in conversation, it's a lot more difficult to budge someone than you might think, because you're so when you're by yourself and when you're conversing by yourself, say on a podcast, it's very easy to convince yourself that you are in the right. And so that's why it's good to go outside your comfort zone and discuss with people that you may think are on the same side as you are, but that will still just sharpen or challenge you in the ways that you need to be challenged in your beliefs and in your stances. The next thing that I want to get to is the moral ambivalence of the United States of America. What is that? What is that? Like what am I talking about when I um mention moral ambivalence, and that's a term that pops up in this study, and I think is encapsulated in this the next couple quotes I'm about to read for you here. The twin axes of morality and legality combine to situate attitudes toward abortion, mediated through multiple wells of meaning. On legality, 14% of our interviewees say abortion should be illegal in all circumstances. Half, 51%, say abortion should be legal under certain circumstances, and 35% support legality under any circumstance. On morality, 1/3 are morally opposed to abortion. So this is where the ambivalence starts to come into play. Okay, um, on morality, 1/3 are morally opposed to abortion. 38% say it depends, and 29% are not morally opposed. So the 1/3 raises question marks because only 14% say that abortion should be illegal in all circumstances. Okay, so there's a red flag or a big question mark I have about this survey. On morality, so seen in context of the full interview, beyond the narrowness of survey questions, an even higher proportion of interviewees offer caveats and conditions in doubt to their stances in abortion. Here's the kicker. Nearly all Americans feel conflicted in some way about abortion. Surveys underestimate the ambivalence that emerges when Americans talk through their own understandings of abortion. So from that statement, how do we have 51% of interviewees saying that abortion can be legal under certain circumstances and conditions, and then 35% of them support legality under any circumstance? That just is mind-boggling. If the majority of Americans feel conflicted in some way about abortion, why is there? Okay, we'll get to that. I think that there's an explanation for that. The highest proportion, back to the survey, of interviewees expressed neither moral opposition nor the opposite, but rather ambivalence. Here you go. Here it is. It depends. Overall, 38% of our interviewees say that abortion's morality depends, tying the morality of abortion to circumstance. And this is where I think a lot of people have gotten stuck because they've allowed themselves to be convinced by the splitting of hairs, right? Once you acknowledge that the child is not alive at conception, and that abortion can really is a bit of a gray area, like where does life really start, and then list all of these reasons for why abortion should be okay in these circumstances, you start getting people waffling on their stances. And when you get people who start waffling on the definition of abortion, they're willing to start prioritizing other things above the life of that child in the womb. And when they start doing that, you get a country that is okay with the slaughter of innocent children. And then when that is canonized, I think, into law, then people start having not only to argue over the morality, but also over the legality. And that's what leads us to this next part of the survey. And it says, many Americans are uncomfortable making unequivocal statements about the morality of abortion for someone else. The most common explanation for moral ambivalence stems from the belief that one cannot or should not assess the morality of another's decision. Pausing here. So when you start allowing yourself to get away from the absolutes and get into the subjectivity of a topic, then you get moral ambivalence. Then you get to the point where you don't know if you can call something wrong that by law is legal. We began this section with the observation, and once again, this is coming from the survey, that attitudes toward abortion are complex, interlocking, and at times contradictory. The Americans we spoke to did not always neatly separate their moral views from their legal ones. Sometimes they realized and acknowledged this or struggled with it, other times not. When we asked whether something that is immoral should be illegal, responses range from the state does not belong in the church, but the church belongs in the state, to people are free to make whatever bad decisions they want. Where personal morality is distrusted, legal regulation is recommended. And honestly, that last quote where Trevor, the guy who is being interviewed, said, people are free to make whatever bad decisions they want, strikes me as like as a principle that I've heard before. Doesn't that sound like, oh, that's right, the LGBTQ movement? What does it matter to you what this person does in private? If it's not affecting you, what does it matter? Well, what matters is the objective truth. What matters is what is right and what is wrong, and the truth that has been instilled in us by our Creator. Remember, we read Romans 1 last Monday just when we discussed Wayfair Gates. I think we could approach that and read it right now again, because really, when we get away from the objective truth, we allow this gray area between morality and legality, and this moral ambivalence that derives from it. Once we have gotten to that moral ambivalence, it's a lot easier for us to get pushed off our hill and say, actually, this hill really isn't worth dying over, when that hill that we just relinquished is now a child's life that has been taken by his or her mother. And so I think that this survey accomplished two things very well. One, it shows the difficulty of having a conversation like this. Two, it captured the moral ambivalence that has led the United States away from objective truth and away from what is right. What Americans are feeling when the survey says the majority of Americans felt conflicted on abortion, that they said that Americans don't want abortion. That's the Holy Spirit. That is God's general revelation written on their hearts. And sometimes you can call that natural law. It is wrong for you to take the life of another human being. Full stop. That's what they're feeling tugged on their hearts. Everything else on this whole moral ambivalence deal, everything else on their confliction between whether or not they should tell someone else that they're wrong in having an abortion, is centered around the idea that, you know what, it's actually not that big of a deal. They've reasoned themselves away from God. They've reasoned themselves away from the truth. And I think that's really important to remember, going back to point one. So to bring this full circle, it definitely accomplishes just how tricky the situation all is, this war over abortion, because people have gotten so confused and so turned around that they don't know their right hand from their left, right? I think that's the passage from Nehemiah. They don't know their right hand from their left. And so when you get engaged into a conversation, realize that this isn't necessarily just an argument over whether abortion is right or wrong. They've moved far beyond that position and far beyond that discussion in their mind and in their stance. So all of that being said, I think that this would be a great study to read through, to at least familiarize yourself with, because it goes more in depth on the opposition to abortion, but also the permissiveness to abortion, and then the moral ambivalence is something that I want to discuss and hone in on, and then the conversation surrounding it. So this survey captured a lot of great things, and I hope that this helped to just kind of stir the pot a little bit, and just don't forget this one battle, this one war we're waging right now, as we're having to deal with Black Lives Matter movement, the coronavirus, and the election upcoming. There's a lot going on, so make sure you're reading your Bible and you're praying. And as always, remember that the life that you have been given and the life that you have received includes every area of life. A child's life is no exception. God bless, and have a wonderful start to your week.